Here's something nobody is telling you right now. The supreme leader of Iran is dead, killed. In the last few hours, a joint U.S. Israeli airstrike obliterated his compound in Tehran while he slept, and the White House has not made a single formal statement to the American people. Not one. Instead, Donald Trump is at Mar-a-Lago, cracking jokes to journalists about who he'd like Iran's next leader to be. Meanwhile, a ballistic missile just punched through Israel's Iron Dome and hit central Tel Aviv. Apartment towers are on fire in Bahrain. Dubai International Airport has been struck. And right now, as you watch this, dozens of oil tankers carrying 20 to 30% of the world's entire seaborne oil supply are turning around in the Strait of Hormuz. Here is what every major outlet is missing tonight. Killing Khamenei did not end this war. The history, the evidence, and the institutional logic of the Iranian state all point the same direction. It may have just made this catastrophically more dangerous. Tonight I will show you exactly why, what actually happened, what it means legally and constitutionally, who really holds power in Iran right now, and what the next 72 hours will determine for all of us. Stay with me, because this is the most consequential night in American foreign policy in at least a decade, and the people who are supposed to be explaining it to you are either asleep or looking the other way. To understand where we are, we need to establish what has been confirmed, what has been credibly reported, and what remains unverified. Let me walk you through it. According to multiple credible sources, corroborated by satellite imagery obtained by the New York Times, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, supreme leader of the Islamic Republic of Iran for 35 years, was killed in a joint U.S. Israeli airstrike targeting his residential compound in Tehran. Photographs of his body were reportedly shown to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and President Trump before the news broke publicly. The operation is officially designated Operation Epic Fury. Satellite imagery from Airbus Defense and Space confirms the compound was entirely destroyed. Khamenei was one of several senior Iranian officials killed in the strike. One detail matters enormously here. The strike occurred during a convergence of the Jewish Sabbath and the Islamic holy month of Ramadan. Intelligence assessments cited in early reporting suggest the timing was deliberate, chosen because Iranian security planners were assessed to be less vigilant during periods of religious observance. They chose this moment because they believed Iran would not see it coming. And apparently, they were right. As of this recording, President Trump was monitoring the campaign not from the White House Situation Room, but from Mar-a-Lago in Palm Beach, alongside Secretary of State Rubio, CIA Director Ratcliffe, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs Kane, Vice President Vance, DNI Gabbard, and Treasury Secretary Bessent. Iran has responded immediately and forcefully. A ballistic missile struck central Tel Aviv, with reports indicating it penetrated the Iron Dome. Retaliatory strikes are ongoing across the Gulf. A high-rise near the U.S. Navy's 5th Fleet headquarters in Bahrain is on fire. Dubai International Airport has been hit by Iranian Shahid drones, with footage showing mass evacuations. And there are deeply troubling, unconfirmed reports that a joint U.S.-Israeli strike hit a girls' elementary school in the Iranian city of Minab, with early estimates of approximately 100 children killed. Images on open-source intelligence channels show children's backpacks and rubble. If confirmed, this will be one of the defining humanitarian incidents of this entire conflict. What we know for certain, Khamenei is dead, the compound is destroyed, the U.S. and Israel jointly conducted the strikes, and Iran has escalated immediately and broadly. What remains unclear, the succession timeline, the full Minab casualty count, and the precise operational status of the Strait of Hormuz. Before you think removing a supreme leader ends the Islamic Republic, let's look at what history actually tells us. 3 precedents, all pointing the same direction. January 2020, Trump ordered the assassination of General Qasem Soleimani, commander of the IRGC's Quds Force. By virtually every intelligence assessment, Soleimani was more operationally powerful than Khamenei in day-to-day command of Iran's regional proxy network. His death was celebrated as a decisive strategic blow. His successor assumed command within 24 hours. Iran's proxy infrastructure across Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen continued with minimal disruption. The Houthis are still launching missiles into the Red Sea today. Second, September 2024, Israel assassinated Hezbollah Secretary General Hassan Nasrallah, who had led the organization for over 3 decades and was the intellectual architect of the most capable non-state military force in the Middle East. Within weeks, Hezbollah had reorganized its leadership and resumed operations. Institutional depth proved more durable than any individual. Third, and most instructive, 1989, the death of Ayatollah Khamenei, the founder of the Islamic Republic itself. His death prompted widespread predictions of regime collapse. What actually happened? The Assembly of Experts convened within 24 hours, appointed Khamenei as supreme leader, and the regime deepened its revolutionary ideology and survived. The Islamic Republic was not built around one man. It was built around a system of interlocking institutions, the Guardian Council, the Assembly of Experts, the IRGC, the parallel intelligence apparatus, specifically designed to survive the death of any individual leader, including the supreme leader himself. Stop. Because here is the part almost no one is talking about tonight, and it may be the most important part of this entire story. Let us go through the dimensions of this crisis that will actually determine what happens next. Here is what should make every American, regardless of party, stop and think. This war does not have congressional authorization. That is not a talking point. That is a constitutional fact. Article 1, Section 8 of the U.S. Constitution is unambiguous. The power to declare war belongs to Congress, not the President. The War Powers Resolution of 1973, enacted specifically to prevent unilateral executive military action after Vietnam, requires the President to notify Congress within 48 hours of introducing forces into hostilities and prohibits sustained combat operations beyond 60 days without explicit congressional authorization. No such authorization has been sought. No notification has been publicly confirmed. Constitutional scholars across the ideological spectrum, from the Federalist Society to progressive constitutional law centers, broadly agree a joint U.S. Israeli strike campaign targeting a foreign head of state, conducted without congressional notification, is an unconstitutional act of war. Beyond domestic law, Article 2 of the UN Charter prohibits the use of force against any sovereign state's territorial integrity. To justify this under international law, the U.S. must invoke Article 51's self-defense exception and demonstrate an imminent armed attack, a threshold that will be fiercely contested. And if MINAB is confirmed, if a joint strike destroyed a girls' school and killed approximately 100 children, that implicates the laws of armed conflict under the Geneva Conventions. I will say this clearly, that could constitute a war crime. The International Criminal Court, which already has outstanding warrants related to the Israel-Gaza conflict, would have clear grounds to expand its investigation. Now the political dimension. Trump, speaking to Axios correspondent Barak Ravid, stated he has several off-ramps and could end it in 2 or 3 days and tell Iran to see you again in a few years. When asked who would replace Khamenei, Trump told NBC, "I don't know, but at some point they'll be calling me to ask who I'd like." I'm only being a little bit sarcastic when I say that. The President of the United States, while American forces are in active combat, while missiles strike Tel Aviv and buildings burn in Bahrain, is making jokes about foreign succession to journalists from a resort in Florida. He has not formally addressed the American people. Not once. This creates an enormous political problem. Trump's coalition was built significantly on anti-interventionist sentiment. The America First movement, the MAGA base, libertarian-leaning conservatives, they ran explicitly against open-ended Middle Eastern military entanglement. This operation tests that coalition in real time. Congressional leaders are either silent or scrambling. The authorization question alone is a massive vulnerability. And if Trump does simply walk away, as his own statement suggests he might, what happens to the Iranian civilians celebrating in the streets tonight, daring to hope? What happens to the Gulf states whose cities are burning as a direct consequence of decisions made without their consent? This next part affects your wallet. Directly, not metaphorically. 1 in every 4 barrels of oil that moves by ship anywhere on Earth passes through the Strait of Hormuz, a waterway Iran is now threatening to close. According to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, 20 to 30% of globally traded seaborne oil and roughly 20% of global liquefied natural gas transit that strait every day. Bloomberg and independent maritime analysts report dozens of tankers are halting, idling, or diverting to ports in Qatar and the UAE. The IRGC has issued formal warnings to maritime traffic. Major shipping firms have suspended all transit until further notice. The last time there was a serious Hormuz crisis, oil prices spiked roughly 15% within a week. Airlines, logistics chains, and fuel-dependent industries face immediate cost pressure. The global economy, already navigating elevated inflation in multiple major economies, has virtually no buffer for a sustained energy supply shock of this scale. This reaches into the daily lives of ordinary Americans within days, not months. On public opinion, no major polling on this specific conflict exists yet. Events are too fresh. But pre-existing data provides critical context. A 2024 Pew Research survey found 57% of Americans opposed U.S. military involvement in new Middle Eastern conflicts. Support for military action against Iran specifically has consistently polled below 40% in Gallup, YouGov, and Chicago Council on Global Affairs surveys over the past 5 years. Media framing is already diverging sharply. Conservative outlets emphasize the elimination of a state sponsor of terrorism and frame the operation as decisive leadership. Progressive and center-left media foreground the constitutional violations, humanitarian toll, and absence of any exit strategy. On social media, two images are circulating simultaneously: Iranian civilians dancing in the streets celebrating Khamenei's death, and children's backpacks in Minab rubble. Both are real. Both matter. The administration's decision to run this war from a resort, without a presidential address, without congressional consultation, and without a public strategic rationale, is generating backlash across partisan lines in a way few foreign policy decisions ever do. Internationally, U.S. allies are almost certainly furious in private while carefully measuring public statements. European NATO members who depend on Middle Eastern energy were almost certainly not consulted. Gulf states, Bahrain, UAE, Qatar, are being directly struck by Iranian retaliation as a consequence of decisions in which they had no voice. China, which imports more oil through Hormuz than any other nation, has an enormous immediate economic stake in that waterway stability. Beijing's response will be one of the most critical variables to watch. Russia, still fighting in Ukraine, may see strategic opportunity in American overextension. Let's talk about who actually holds power in Iran right now. The answer might surprise you. Start with the IRGC. Think of them as Iran's military intelligence agency and Fortune 500 company rolled into one. The IRGC controls an estimated 30 to 40% of the Iranian economy. It has its own aerospace and missile forces, the ones striking Tel Aviv and Bahrain tonight. It has its own intelligence apparatus operating parallel to civilian services. And critically, it has ideological commitments and institutional interests that exist entirely independent of whoever holds the title of Supreme Leader. The IRGC is not a tool of the Supreme Leader. In many respects, the Supreme Leader depends on the IRGC. Tonight, the IRGC is the most consequential institutional actor in Iran. Next, the Assembly of Experts, the 88-member clerical body constitutionally empowered to select the next Supreme Leader. They will convene under unprecedented external military pressure. The 1989 precedent tells us they will move quickly to project continuity and revolutionary resolve. The political incentives within the revolutionary system reward ideological hardness, not pragmatic accommodation, especially under conditions of national crisis and foreign attack. Expect the next Supreme Leader to be more extreme, not less. For Israel, Netanyahu has achieved a stated objective. But Iran's proxy network was not dismantled tonight. Hezbollah retains its arsenal. Hamas continues operating. The Houthis remain in Yemen. These are decentralized entities with their own operational autonomy. Killing the Supreme Leader does not sever the relationships that sustain those networks. Now let's map where this goes. 3 scenarios grounded in evidence and history, and I will be honest about the uncertainty involved, because anyone claiming to know exactly how this ends is not being straight with you. Scenario 1, most likely at roughly 50 to 60% probability, controlled escalation followed by a negotiated pause. Iran, having demonstrated it can strike regional capitals and threaten global energy supplies while absorbing the loss of its Supreme Leader, has established powerful deterrence leverage. The U.S., facing domestic political pressure, oil market disruption, absent congressional authorization, and no articulated strategic objective, has strong incentives for an off-ramp. Qatar and Oman, historically reliable back-channel intermediaries between Washington and Tehran, are likely already facilitating quiet contact. A temporary ceasefire could emerge within 4 to 6 weeks. If Iran's new leadership calculates that full-scale escalation risks the one thing the Islamic Republic's entire structure exists to prevent, a genuine existential threat to the regime itself. Scenario 2. At roughly 25 to 35% probability, regional war expansion. This becomes likely if Iran's new leadership, chosen under siege conditions, concludes the true U.S. Israeli objective is full regime change. The strategic calculation then flips entirely. The IRGC would have every rational incentive to maximize the cost of continued engagement, a formal Hormuz closure, simultaneous activation of every proxy network, Hezbollah opening a full northern front against Israel, Shia militias striking U.S. bases across Iraq and Syria, Houthi campaigns against Gulf infrastructure. The economic and humanitarian consequences of this scenario are, to use the word precisely, catastrophic. Scenario 3, at roughly 10 to 15%, internal regime fracture. The Iranian population has organized against the clerical establishment before 2009, 2019, 2022. If Khamenei's death combined with military pressure and economic strain creates a factional split within the IRGC and a popular opening, there is a real, if limited, chance this cracks the regime from inside. But history is almost uniformly clear on this point. External military attack consolidates nationalist sentiment around existing power structures rather than fracturing them. Iraq. Libya. There is no serious reason to believe Iran will be different. Watch these variables in the next 72 hours, who the Assembly of Experts selects as supreme leader, and what ideological signal that sends, whether Hormuz moves toward formal closure or partial reopening, whether any member of Congress formally invokes the War Powers Resolution, and whether any major ally publicly distances itself from the operation. Every generation has a moment when ordinary people must decide whether to look away or stay informed and hold power accountable. This is one of those moments. Strip away the triumphalism, the resort optics, the jokes about succession planning, and here is what actually happened tonight. The United States launched an act of war against a sovereign nation, killed its head of state, and may have killed approximately 100 schoolchildren, without a single congressional vote, without a formal address to the American people, without a stated strategic objective, and without a coherent answer to the oldest question in military strategy. Then what? Khamenei's death does not end the Islamic Republic. The system was built to survive this. The successor will be harder. The IRGC will be angrier. The proxies will be more active. And the president may simply walk away in 2 or 3 days, leaving behind burning cities, shattered families, and a region more volatile than before. The people of Iran deserve freedom. They have deserved it for decades. But freedom does not arrive on the back of an unauthorized airstrike with no exit plan, conducted by a president joking to journalists from a golf resort. The most powerful thing you can do right now, short of calling your congressional representative and asking one simple question, what is the legal authority for this war, is making sure the people around you understand what is actually happening. Share this video. Subscribe, because in the next 48 hours everything could change. And you need to be here when it does.